Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you on this LinkedIn Live. My name is Alex Rumble. I'm the CMO here at HTEC. We're a leading provider of complex and industry-specific software and embedded hardware engineering services, and we focus on a number of industry. Insurance is one of our core industries, so welcome to this particular session, which is focused on AI in the insurance industry. And welcome to you, Gary, and thank you very much for joining me. Gary, when it comes to financial services and insurance, you have some incredible credentials. You've been the CEO at Tesco Insurance, Money Services, as well as Saga Services. You've occupied senior leadership positions at Barclays, GE Monies, and HBOS, and you are currently on several boards in non-executive position, and you recently became an advisor at HTEC, which we're delighted about. Thank you again very much for joining me. Now a message to our audience. Welcome and thank you for taking part in this session. The purpose of today is to explore insurance and AI, and specifically AI in three distinctive areas. The first one being claims and claims management, the second one being customer experience and customer duty, and the third one being pricing and underwriting. We have our own HTEC team of experts online ready to reply to your comment or to your questions. They are both AI experts, technical experts, and domain experts. So feel free to engage, and we look forward to engaging with you. Gary, when it comes to financial services and insurance, you have some very impressive credentials. So we're very grateful for you joining us and imparting your knowledge with us. You've been the CEO at Tesco Insurance and Money Services, as well as Saga Services. And you occupy a number of leadership positions at Barclays, GE Money, and HBOS. You are also on several boards as non-executive positions, and you've recently become an advisor for HTEC. So thank you again for joining me.
Hi, Alice. It's good to be here.
Now, for our audience, welcome and thank you for taking part into this session. The purpose of today is to explore three areas where we believe AI can make a real difference in the insurance industry. The first one being claims and claims management, customer experience, and specifically consumer duty, but also pricing and underwriting. So we have our HTEC team of AI, technical and domain experts online. They will be here to answer your question, give you pointers, and engage with you. So please do take advantage of that and feel free to ask any questions that you would like to ask. Now, before we dive into those questions, Gary, when we speak about AI and insurance in the same sentence, what springs to mind?
Well, I think probably the two as opportunity and risk, I suppose, but particularly kind of opportunity. The foundation of all decision making within insurance is really around data and the use of data. And you know, over the years, I've certainly been in insurance. The volume of data that is now available to insurers is absolutely phenomenal, both internal and external sources of data that are available in order to help insurers make as accurate decisions as they possibly can, almost to the point at which the volume of data that is available is almost kind of overwhelming. And when you take the volume of data that is available to insurers, plus the fact that, and particularly in the UK recently, there's been a lot of consolidation in the market. There's a huge amount of data sets or data platforms that insurers are having to deal with and try and bring all that data together within those different data platforms to draw kind of valuable insight. So I think AI will certainly has the potential to add a huge amount of value to insurers in terms of how they can more efficiently utilize that data that's available to us more efficiently, deliver better experiences for customers, etc. So that is probably one of the preeminent kind of opportunities, if you like, business cases for insurers in using AI. I think another area of it really is around making best possible decisions from a customer's perspective. Know your customers better, and certainly within the UK, as you said, consumer duty is a huge piece of regulation rather, that was introduced in the last couple of years in order to kind of encourage insurers, brokers, etc., to know their customers better, to make sure that we're delivering good outcomes for customers, and you need to evidence that. And I think that's one of the things that the regulator is looking for, the evidence to support the fact that you're doing great things for customers. And again, I think the opportunity using AI to kind of gather that data, gather that customer intelligence, and turn that customer input information into valuable insights, and then to make sure that you can then demonstrate and evidence that you're delivering good outcomes from customers because you know them better, is going to be a real kind of really valuable development innovation within the insurance sector from a regulatory and from a customer's perspective. I do think one aspect of AI that's with insurance that's going to be very interesting is how roles and responsibilities will evolve, and how the regulation will develop as well, because the regulators are still kind of getting to grips with AI. But from a people perspective, roles are likely to change. I like to think that it will result in creating richer opportunities for people to develop in their roles, more interesting work, to be focusing on more interesting work rather than some of the kind of low value activities, kind of more mundane tasks of gathering information together. So I'm hoping that will be a really, really good thing for people looking to develop a career within insurance. But I think finally, I would just say, when I think about AI and insurance, certainly in the UK anyway, a lot of insurers are really playing catch up. Sorry, you were going to say?
No, absolutely. I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. I mean, we are, the industry is naturally a very kind of conservative industry. It often kind of takes quite a bit of time. It did with digital, it did with developments in terms of different channels, price comparison websites, etc. In the UK, it took some time for those to kind of take hold and for insurers to respond to the change in dynamics within the market and change, evolving technologies. And I think it's going to be really important for insurers to kind of get up to speed as soon as they possibly can with AI, if they're going to kind of be competitive and win in the market.
So that kind of brings me to another question, which is, I think not only is the insurance industry trying to play catch up as you've described, but it's also very hard to scale. And I'm there are pilots that are taking place within each of the organization, but then moving to something which is much more enterprise-wide transformation. Considering it is so complex, considering the organization are trying to mitigate risk, why is it so hard? And what do you see as some of the go-dos that insurance companies need to do to try and scale up on that internal use of AI?
Yeah, well, I would say that there are a number of challenges that insurers are going to face. Again, as I mentioned earlier on, around the consolidation in the market. Not only are they inheriting multiple different data sets and platforms, they're already also inheriting a number of different legacy platforms. And I know of a number of firms in the UK insurance sector that have legacy platforms going back 20, 30 years, policy admin platforms, claims platforms, etc. So to kind of mold and to overlay AI tools and solutions into those legacy platforms is actually going to be a real challenge for some of the insurers, in the same way as, again, digital was a while ago. How do you put a digital front end and connect it into legacy platforms was a challenge that we all faced kind of 10 years ago. So it's a similar challenge for them. But I think also some of the platforms that some insurers are moving to are more modularized platforms. So I think for those insurers that have moved to modularized platforms, it's probably going to be maybe easier for them to bring the AI tools and then embed them or overlay them against those legacy platforms. That's going to be one of the biggest challenges. I think, as I mentioned earlier on, the regulation is still evolving. Well, I wouldn't even say it's evolving. I'm not sure it's even started to think, or it's probably started to think, not actually implement any changes to the regulations to reflect the impact of AI. Certainly a while ago, there were certainly some conversations around the impact of machine learning in pricing and the potential unintended consequences associated with allowing machines without human interaction and intervention to oversee, if you like, provide oversight over the outcomes of those machine-led decisions. So I think the regulation will evolve and change significantly, I think, in relation to AI over the next 3 to 5 years. But I'd say the FCA, the PRA are kind of starting to try and understand what the implications of AI is to the business. And data privacy is another one. Clearly, as you use more and more of that data, GDPR is clearly a really important piece of regulation. And it's important that firms take that into consideration when they're utilizing all of this data and putting it into these AI tools. I think finally, and probably actually most importantly, it's going to be about people and culture, right? Yeah. So as I said earlier on, naturally, the industry is typically quite conservative, it's risk averse by nature, and there will need to be a sea change in how people view tools like AI in the future. Otherwise, those firms, I think, are going to get kind of left behind. And there'll be an understandable kind of nervousness about jobs and about roles. There'll be kind of some role preservation going on, I'm sure, for some people, because they see AI as a threat as opposed to an opportunity. And certainly in the past, when we've looked at digital and the call center staff saw digital as a threat, certainly my kind of guidance, advice, leadership to the contact center guys is digital will enable us to grow faster, to build a stronger business, to create more enriched opportunities for you to develop as individuals in maybe slightly different roles. And there will always be a reason for customers to want to call up and speak to an individual. So there'll still be that requirement for human interaction. It's not a complete replacement of. It's providing alternative forms of whether it's processes or whether it's how we deal with customers. But that whole culture shift is going to be a really important one, and it's going to require, people to think progressively, for people to be looking in the through the front windscreen, not through the rear view mirror too much. Yeah. To think about how things are evolving. And also, really importantly, to look across other industries that are probably actually moving at a faster pace, and to learn lessons from that and how they can adapt and utilize some of those learnings for the insurance sector. But I think it's going to be really, really important for the leadership within insurance companies to realize what's coming down the path and to respond to AI.
So it's interesting. You made a point earlier, and I was going to save the question for later on in the conversation, but actually I'm going to ask you now. I was at the World Economic Forum recently, and one of the studies that they showed was that at a very sort of executive level, there is still this misunderstanding or lack of understanding of what AI is. And they've identified that as actually being one of the core reason for this lack of scalability from a cultural standpoint. Is that something that you would agree, Ron? What you're thinking on that?
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that. And certainly one of the boards I was on, that was a subject of discussion actually a year ago, is around what is this AI? How is it going to impact on us as a business? Where are the opportunities? Where are the risks? And what do we need to do to kind of, frankly, get with the program, get with how things are developing. But it actually had to start with what is AI. So you're 100% right, Alex, and that is definitely an education piece that many boards will need to go through, because there's machine learning, there's things that certainly happened in the UK around pricing, certainly in the personal line space, around the utilization of machine learning. What is the difference between machine learning and AI, and what's the difference between AI, Gen AI? And so there's certainly a huge education piece that first and foremost needs to take place with boards and with leadership teams before they can then start to kind of digest AI, what it is, where it can help your business, what are the problems you're trying to solve for, etc. Yeah. And also really, really importantly, which I kind of touched on around the regulation piece earlier on, is around what kind of oversight are you going to build across the business? Because, as I said, the regulators are just starting to get to grips with this. So you'll need to, I would say, probably even try and get ahead of the regulators. If I was in an insurance, on the leadership team of an insurance business today, and to kind of think through what risk framework you need to put in place, what things you need to consider, what are the risks associated with it, which insurers are typically quite good at thinking about what the risks are before they think about the opportunities. It sounds a bit critical of the industry that I've been in for many years now. But we are good at thinking about the risks. But we need to maybe start thinking about the opportunities and thinking about what controls you need to put in place, what risks might materialize, and how you can mitigate those risks first and foremost.
Thank you. And we've talked, a little bit about the hurdles to that scalability, and let's explore some of the areas of value that you've referred to a little bit at the beginning. But let's go into a little bit more detail. Now, at the beginning, we mentioned 3 areas where we felt there was some very specific value that we could garner from AI. The claims management piece is clearly very important. The underwriting and the customer experience, including that consumer duty piece you've just referred to. So let's start with claim. Drawing on your experience and based on what you see today, what are some of the challenges that insurance companies face in their current processes where you see that AI can play a very pivotal and transformational part?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably, well, it depends on the nature of the organization, but I think claims represents probably one of the biggest areas of opportunity, I would say, within the insurance sector with AI. Again, there's still a lot of claims operations that are still kind of drowning in data forms, a lot of manual processes still in place, particularly, either because there's volume, because you have kind of X hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of claims that you have to kind of deal with on an annual basis, right the way through to kind of businesses that have more complex, more sophisticated claims that require a huge amount of analysis from claims handlers and adjusters, etc., to determine what the outcome of that claim might be. So I think probably one of the biggest opportunities is around utilizing AI tools to kind of automate the collection, the collation of the data, the sourcing of information, in order to then provide that information to the claims handler for them to do what I would call more the value-add judgmental parts of the process, which frankly, I suspect if you ask the claims handler is the more interesting part of the job, is where they're more complex and challenging claims. I mean, I was kind of involved probably for most of my career in motor insurance, and when you get some of the personal injury claims, you can, there are files that thick, maybe even bigger, of papers and documents, doctors' reports, legal reports, police reports, etc., and a huge amount of the work that the PI guys get involved in is actually around just pulling all of that information together, pulling it together into a file, and then cross-checking it, looking at other claims maybe. And I think what AI has the opportunity to do is, as I said earlier on, is collate all of those claim forms, police reports, whatever it might be, bring them all together and present them to a claims handler in order for them to spend their time on the judgmental side of things. So claims documentation, automation, triaging has a phenomenal kind of potential to, first of all, to improve the customer experience, because clearly it should enable the claims handler to reach decisions much more quickly, which has got to be good for the customer, because clearly, the reason you bought the policy, that moment of truth, is when you make the claim. And if you're having to wait weeks or months before you know whether your claim is going to be paid out or not, that can be, and unfortunately, I've been there once or twice, and it's a hugely stressful situation for customers to not know what the outcome of that claim is going to be. So to be able to expedite the whole process and bring that forward has got to be great for customers. Obviously, from a consumer duty perspective, that's going to be a really good thing. From a company's perspective, from an operational cost perspective, that's got to be good as well, because it should theoretically reduce your operational costs. And from a colleague perspective, that's got to be a good thing, because hopefully, as I say, it can result in a much more rewarding kind of time spent on the job, undertaking those judgmental decisions rather than collating a load of data and a load of information from various forms. So I think that whole claims automation and triage is a big opportunity. I think one area where it can also help is, and this is becoming increasingly kind of important, I think, actually, ironically, with the development of AI, etc., and increasing number of potentially in cyber attacks, the sophistication of frauds that perpetrators are able to kind of undertake, is making it more and more difficult for insurers to kind of detect where there's a fraud and where there isn't a fraud. So the ability to use data to kind of identify patterns of fraudulent behavior, maybe even syndicates that have certain ways of kind of presenting information on claims, will enable the fraud teams to kind of detect those frauds, either hopefully, first of all, to prevent those frauds in the first place, to identify patterns of behavior to prevent you from kind of writing that business and identifying those potential frauds, and also at the back end to make sure that if there is a fraud, that you can detect that fraud and you can make sure you don't pay that claim out. And I think that has broader opportunities and consequences, probably not just in the UK, but globally, where as these more sophisticated fraud syndicates kind of attack insurance companies, etc., across the world, you can utilize AI in the UK, we have fraud bureaus where the insurers collaborate to pull together all of their various bits of information to identify frauds that are cross insurance, cross sector. And I think, again, the field bureaus can have an opportunity utilizing that AI to bring all that wealth of data where various insurance firms might have experienced fraud from the same syndicates, identify what those syndicates are and make sure that can bring benefit to the industry as a whole. And ultimately, the more we can reduce fraud in the industry, the more value we can deliver back to customers in terms of lower prices, because they're not having to basically pay for fraud in terms of higher premiums.
And you've kind of made me think a little bit about, you've talked about globally, you talked about pricing. There's a lot of, global events. There's a lot of geopolitical, disruption at the moment. How is that affecting pricing and ultimately the consumer experience? Where do you think AI can help with that?
Yeah, well, definitely the geopolitical events have had a significant impact. When I think back, if we'd been able to have AI, you'd use AI as we went through COVID, Ukraine wars, supply chain challenges that kind of caused, certainly in the UK, and I'm sure kind of globally from a motor perspective and home perspective, I'm sure other lines of business as well. If we've been able to utilize AI or a tool like AI to identify patterns of changes in customer behavior, etc., earlier, then I think we would have been able to meet those challenges probably more effectively as an industry than we probably did. As I say, it probably took too long for us all to identify that as a consequence of COVID and things like working from home. So I'll give you a specific example. As people started to work from home more often, then claims frequency on motor dropped quite considerably, and then it's reached a level now. And also the time of people traveling moved more away from peak time as well. So, but because insurers and actuaries in particular were kind of saying, well, we don't know whether that's just a blip or whether it's going to be kind of something that's going to pervade over many years, whether it's going to change. It took a long time then for that to be fed back into the pricing and ultimately lower premiums for customers as a consequence of the reduction in the frequency of accidents taking place. Conversely, severity, the cost of the labour, of the parts, etc., because of Ukraine war went up significantly. That again took time for that to feed its way through into pricing and ultimately underwriting decisions and the costs of claims to be reflected in reserving. So I think that's an area where AI could have helped if we'd have, as insurance sector, if we'd have had access to those tools earlier, would have been a benefit to customers and benefit to the corporates as well.
So let's talk a little bit more about benefits to the customer. We've talked about claim, and you've mentioned a couple of experiences you've had. I've had an experience myself. I've had the misfortune of losing my phone at the weekend, so I had to get onto the insurance company and try and fix that. And that was a very, very good experience, which was really nice. But clearly, that making sure that the consumer is in front and centre is really what the UK Financial Conduct Authority is trying to do and regulate with this Consumer Duty Act, which is this higher standard of care when it comes to consumer. It's about prioritising them. It's about making sure that products and services are fit for purpose and that the customers are understood. why is that a good thing, to kind of bring that in? And what do you see some of the challenges that that company might face when it comes to adhering to that new regulation?
Yeah, well, obviously, I think we've all agreed, I think, even before the regulation and when the regulation came in, that to a large extent, that I don't think anybody goes to work in insurance today and says, I want to do a bad thing for customer. They always want to do a good thing for customer, generally speaking. You know, I'm sure in 99.9% of cases, people want to walk away from work saying, I've done some great stuff for my customers today. I think what it provided is a regulatory umbrella over which a set of principles you would be able to test yourself against as an insurer and as a broker. And I think that was really helpful in terms of framing what good looks like. And then it's about your conscience. It's about them being able to demonstrate and provide the evidence to support the fact that you do to yourselves, and ultimately, if you had to the regulator, that you are doing good things for customers. And that's when, again, the data piece comes in, because, you know, I work with firms that have over 100 different metrics that it's measuring itself against to see, like customer metrics, etc., to measure itself to say, well, are we doing good things for customers? Are things improving? Are they deteriorating? If they're deteriorating, why are they deteriorating? And what are we going to, what's the issue? What are we going to do about it? Again, that's if you've got multiple different, I know insurance companies who have 40, 50 different lines of business products, and they have to do what we call a fair value assessment against each product each year to make sure that that product is delivering fair value to customers, that the price is right, that it's reflective of the costs and the resources that you invest in providing that service to the customers, that you haven't got a high degree of complaints against that product, that the customers know the product that they're buying, that there's a need when you look at the claims metrics for that product, the customers. So there's a vast array of data that you need to kind of measure yourselves against to make sure that you're delivering good outcomes for customers. Again, that's where AI can really, really help, because that's a mammoth exercise, particularly some of the smaller insurances or insurance companies or brokers that don't necessarily have all the resources available to them to kind of do that manually, you know, and go through all of those different data sets. So I think the regulation is a good regulation, but it did, and it probably has continued to present challenges for some of the more complex businesses with multiple product lines to then provide the evidence to support the hypothesis that, and hopefully the reality, that they're delivering good things for customers. I think so demonstrating compliance, making sure that you've identified the what the customer's needs are, that you're delivering against those needs, and that's the more defensible part of, or the defense part of the utilization of AI for consumer duty. I think the more proactive and the more beneficial, long-term beneficial aspects of AI in terms of being able to deliver for consumer duty is it should then allow you as a firm to identify customer trends, you know, to personalize offerings. And Gen AI is an area which I know, whether it be from things like chatbots, whether it be personalized offerings to customers, you can use Gen AI specifically to identify what channel that customer wants to interact with you through the best, what type of product that customer wants, what of customer values and what a customer doesn't necessarily value. So you can personalize not just the marketing communications, but actually the product to that customer. You know, we all receive God knows how many kind of different promotional materials through various social media, and social media has a really, you know, does a really good job in starting to kind of identify what's relevant to you as an individual and what isn't relevant to you as an individual. But I think in insurance, we need to kind of continue to refine that and to make sure that we focus on what really matters to our customers, personalize those offerings, and hopefully kind of gives you the opportunity to win that business from the customer more effectively than the competition.
So I think, if I'm understanding this right, it's there's a silver lining under the regulation, which is very much that data is enabling them to then tailor, but they do need to be able to go beyond the reporting piece to really interpret those insights in order to reutilize them in terms of how they design their services. Okay.
And we all know, right? Customers' expectations are just going up and up and up, right?
Yes.
And I genuinely think that AI will give you the opportunity to understand more about your customers more quickly and enable you to deliver an even better outcome for customers than you maybe had them for. And that's where you're going to win. You're going to win as an organization if you know more about your customers and more about kind of where you can provide better services for them. They'll stay with you longer. They'll be more loyal, right? Which is, loyalty is such an important thing in the, you know, in a hugely highly competitive market in the UK, particularly in personal lines, but in all lines. That if you can demonstrate that you know your customers better than anyone else, it's likely to lead to a high degree of loyalty and better commercial outcomes.
And we've talked about claims, and we've talked about consumer duty. Now, the third area that we really wanted to explore was underwriting. And this is another area that we've identified, and you've identified, in terms of where AI can deliver significant value. So I'd love to explore a little bit more how a company will balance the role that AI plays and balance that with automation and the human judgment when it comes to underwriting. What's your thinking on that?
Yeah, I think the AI, you know, in underwriting in a similar way to in claims, you know, a huge amount of the work at the outset is about bringing together a lot of information in order to make the best underwriting decision, particularly for kind of more complex, sophisticated kind of policies or underwriting cases. And again, the variety of different materials that are available, both internal and external, whether it's IoT, whether it's geospatial data, whatever it might be, internal data, bringing all of that information together is still, you know, a key part of an underwriter's role. Now, if you can automate that, wherever possible, automate the document processing, gathering, etc., and provide that to the underwriter in order for the underwriter to ultimately make judgmental decisions about, you know, what the price for that risk might be, and whether you want to underwrite that or not, whether you decline because you might not even want to underwrite that risk. But if you do, then I think spending that time in kind of evaluating the risk based on all the data that's been presented to you, rather than you've had to go out and collect, I think add real value to an underwriting function, and that value in terms of hopefully ultimately making the right decision around the price of that policy, if you choose to write it, or if you chose not to write it because you were potentially exposed to a portfolio. Because where it can help as well is about what the accumulated risk is potentially to a firm of operating, you know, being overweight in a certain sector or a certain type of risk. So it can help you both from a customer's perspective in terms of speed of decision, which is great, which again is really good for customers and could be a game changer for some insurance firms. Getting in there first with your quote and demonstrating why it's a really good value quote and the work that you've done, but also to the organization in terms of making sure that you're making the right decision, best decision from a pricing perspective, and potentially identifying if there is an accumulation of risk, where you've been able to mitigate that accumulation of risk. I think they're the primary areas. Again, I think it'd be really good for underwriters from a career perspective, and focus on the things that you enjoy, probably, rather than having to go out and capture lots of data.
Yeah, and you know, how do you prepare a team to work alongside, you know, AI in terms of, you know, because it's obviously a cultural shift as well, and there's skills differences, you know, within that.
Well, certainly. I mean, I use the analogy of when various firms have implemented Agile, and you start with, you know, rapid prototyping. So take a select piece of business and a group of, I don't know, maybe more progressively thinking underwriters who are looking to ways in which they can enrich their careers and do a better job for their customers, and kind of welcome AI and test it and see how it works, and then evolve, iterate, build the test and learn programs, and then sort of gradually kind of roll it out, maybe potentially to other lines of business. I've certainly seen that, and you know, we've done some work within HTEC where we're working with an insurance partner that's the approach that we've taken, and that seems to be working really well in bringing hearts and minds together. Once you develop, what's always worked for me with Agile is, once you start to build some real advocates, some champions, if you like, within the business, who kind of eulogize about what you've created, then it's it's amazing how other people within the business kind of can see it and kind of want to be part of it, want a piece of the action. And so it's like, well, hang on, why have they got it? And you almost build that. Well, we want that. Why can't we have it for our business? Because I'm still having to collect all this bits of information and hopefully develop the right outcome. I want access to those tools because that's the future. So you start to build a real kind of desire to be part of it, rather than having to drag people along into the future.
And so we've talked about things being a little bit more sort of, at an operational level in terms of the automation, the data insights, and skilling people and cultural change. Now, if you put your CEO hat on for a moment and think about, at that level, what are kind of the real quantitative and qualitative value that you would expect if you're driving your organization, hard in the utilization of AI? What would you be looking for?
I suppose it's metrics. It's a bit like on the consumer duty side of things. So if you look at that like business and you're starting to convert more, you're basically converting more business, you're winning more business because customers are more highly satisfied. The NPS scores have gone up. From a claims operational perspective, the time to kind of decision, if you like, to claim is reduced. So it's all of those kind of metrics, colleague, even kind of employee engagement scores gone
Yes.
up. And I've seen now, where colleague engagement scores have gone through the roof in the area where you're doing the testing. Maybe because they feel, certainly initially, they feel part of an exciting new project. And the employee scores are up there somewhere, and yet they're not with anywhere else. And you kind of want to start to roll it out and bring those scores up. So employee scores, NPS scores, operational efficiencies, customer satisfaction, speed to conversion or completion of claim, all of those kind of metrics, a vast array of metrics, are the ones that you want to kind of start to see kind of moving in the right direction to demonstrate the success of AI.
And that's sort of internal looking at the performance of your own business. What about competitive advantage? If you have, if you're using AI to the extent that we've been exploring here, and you've got some of those metrics, what else can it bring you that is really helping you to drive your competitive advantage? Not just in terms of sort of the similar organization to your own, but what else is happening in the market? There are new organizations, new types of insurance that are coming into the market. Tell me a little bit about that competitive advantage that you might imagine.
Yeah, well, it depends on which kind of, I suppose, which lines of business. But if you start to be in a position where ultimately clients, you can make commitments to clients, customers, that other insurers can't in terms of speed to decision, then frankly, they're more likely to come directly to you than they are to other firms. If you are, and look, it could work both ways, because depending on, if you've got the vast wealth of data that's available to you, it could result in you providing more competitive prices to the customer. But, also it could mean you're more expensive for the competition, because stuff that the competition doesn't know, because you've got access to information, or you've been able to get access to information more quickly than the competitor has. So you could win there. So I think there's the metrics will tell you whether you're winning in that space, because you're winning more clients. You're ahead of the game, you're more efficient, your pricing is more competitive because you're more efficient as a business, and customers are more satisfied. So I think, and I think the other area is around, which as we mentioned earlier on, is around the personalization. You can almost see, right, on the personal line space, and maybe I'm being optimistic here, we've been indoctrinated within the UK now on motor insurance and home insurance to go to a price comparison website to find the best price.
Yes.
If you can, I'm going to be careful what I say here, because a firm I've worked with in the past has been able to utilize its data pre-AI, and it'll have even more opportunity with AI to provide customers with a guaranteed price. So for a policy. So because they know more about that customer than anyone else. Now, it takes a long time to get to that information, and AI can expedite that. But if you can demonstrate that you can provide a price to a customer more quickly and more easily, so you don't have to spend 45 minutes going through a quote, because we've given you a price, that's the price, it's a guaranteed price, because we know you. before you even go to a price comparison website,
Yes.
then you cut that channel almost out of the equation. Now, look, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to require a huge degree of trust from customers in the brand, in the price, etc. But that can create a massive competitive advantage to some firms using AI, where they can go direct to the customer, win that customer before the customer then chooses to go to another channel. Now, that would take time. It would be game changing for some firms, but it's not unrealistic to assume that could happen for some firms that have access to all of that information and use it in the right way with customers.
I want to come back for a moment to legacy systems and fragmented legacy systems. We're seeing a lot insurtech companies. I mean, they obviously come, and they already have, at the root of everything that they do, digital experience. They're already using AI. That makes them much more nimble, much more agile. Even with the use of AI, large insurance company, more traditional insurance company, don't have that same, agility. So how pressing and how urgent is it for them to really address that legacy architecture to enable them to do some of the things that we've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important for most of the firms I can think of have been moving. I was going to say at pace, but we don't really move at pace very often in insurance, to be honest with you. That sounds, I'm telling you, really harsh. But they are moving towards trying to eradicate those legacy platforms and move them into a situation where, whether it's Guidewire or whatever, or EIS, or the kind of policy admin platforms, claims platforms, where they can create this modularized approach where they can bring AI solutions or digital solutions in more effectively. But that is taking time. Now, and I'm going to sound like a bit of a cynic here. Now, some of the insurtech organizations are certainly making some strides within the UK sector, but I think whether it's a customer perspective or whatever, that customers still trust certain brands. And insurance purchase, particularly as you've experienced over the weekend, when you make a claim,
yes,
you kind of want to know that the insurance company is going to deal with you fairly. That, if the claim is going to be paid out and it's going to be dealt with in the right way. There's still a degree of nervousness, I think, from a consumer's perspective around some of the insurtech firms who don't have the brand, they don't have the trust with the consumers that maybe some of the other insurance firms have. I actually think the competition. And look, insurtechs will make strides, and they have made strides over the years into the industry. But I think the insurance companies, even some of the big and medium-sized insurance companies, competing against each other to win in this AI space. So it's not just the insurtechs who are going to be the competition. It's going to be those firms who, for whatever reason, manage to move more quickly, have scale, because you need scale in the UK insurance market because it's so competitive. Margins are pretty thin. And so you have to have scale to win in the market, to win to any kind of substantial kind of effect. So, there are now in the personalized space, there are now increasingly going to be kind of about five or six firms that are going to, capture a huge proportion of the UK market. They're going to be competing against each other. They're going to have to really make some step changes if they really want to win and start to compete against some of those other now bigger scale competitors. In order to win in the space, they're really going to have to embrace AI and deal with some of those legacy challenges more quickly than some of the others. And as I say, it's not going to be easy for a lot of them, because a lot of them have got like 4, 5, 6 legacy platforms. We're not talking about one legacy platform here. We're talking about 4, 5, 6 legacy platforms. So to find a way to bring something above and beyond that, where you can embed AI tools into those kind of legacy platforms, is going to be really important if they're going to win.
And we've already established that the skills and the level of AI skilling within the organization is not as high as it could be, which makes me think in order to accelerate that transformation, you need to find a partner. You need to find an organization that has this 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 expertise within the industry, as well as this AI expertise, so that I can really dive into your specific business? Because yes, there are commonalities, but the processes can be very different as well. Is that something that, if you had to give a piece of advice or impart some knowledge, is that something that you would consider as being an important part?
Absolutely critical. Is as we say, that, as I said earlier on, boards are all having conversations about AI now, and is it an opportunity? Is it a risk? What are the risks? I would encourage firms, and I'm sure that a lot of them are doing it, but I would encourage firms, if you're not doing it, to first of all do your research, identify, as you said earlier on, right? What is AI? If you've hopefully answered that question, what is AI? What type of AI? Gen AI? Then start to look at, what opportunities can AI help you to resolve within your respective businesses? You think of it really, really methodically. Then start to identify, where do you think are the areas that can deliver the maximum amount of benefit? What's the problem that you're trying to solve for? Hey, how can AI help you to solve for that problem? Start to develop some ideas of what that might be. Then identify a partner. As you said, Alex, the insurers are going to have to partner with firms. I think it'd be, ambitious, optimistic to think you can build your own AI team from scratch overnight or whatever and start to do this kind of stuff. So I would, firms like HTEC are going to be, in my opinion, obviously I'm now biased, being an advisor of HTEC, but are going to be absolutely critical to help take insurers on this journey through AI by identifying what, some use cases, some rapid prototyping, because we've done it. Clearly, HTEC have done it in multiple different sectors already, including insurance. So working with a firm like HTEC to identify what the problem is you're trying to solve for, develop a plan, do some rapid prototyping. And once you've done that, and you build out those use cases on a kind of gradual basis, and then you can start to embed AI into your core processes and your products, and ultimately aim for, the utopian is clearly having AI enterprise-wide solutions. In the same way we used to talk about digital first and mobile first, maybe it's AI first now.
And if I think about the audience that's watching us at the moment, and I'm hoping is getting very engaged in the conversation, who are some of those personas, some of those individual that should really engage with HTEC, and specifically for what reason maybe? Yeah.
Well, and what I would say is the areas of insurance that probably can, where the biggest benefits are likely to come from, and therefore the personas, the roles, the types of individuals that should be looking to embrace AI are things like the claims directors, underwriting directors, I don't know, chief operating officers who own probably what is the bulk of the cost within an insurance business, and where the bulk of the interactions are with customers. So ultimately where the benefits could come from. So chief operating officers, etc., and naturally CEOs and CFOs, etc. But I would almost so they are the underwriting directors, chief underwriting officers. They are the people where I think the benefits would come in the best, and therefore they're the people that should be listening to this and then researching and identifying how AI can help them within their respective roles and within their respective businesses. But at the same time, I think the people that are going to be, as I said earlier on, the most successful, it's not necessarily the CEO or the claims director, it's the progressive leaders, right? It's the CTOs. It's not just the CTOs, because this isn't just a technology thing. And I certainly preached this in one of my previous jobs. It's not business and technology. It now needs to be business technology. Technology is part of the business. It's a critical enabler to the business. You can't run the two things separately. So it needs to come from the business, with technology being the enabler, and in this case, AI or technology being the enabler to support the business to deliver against its objectives. So really progressive thinkers within the industry are going to be the ones that are going to benefit the most in whatever role they are within the leadership of an organization.
Thank you very much, Gary. This has been a really insightful and really sort of thought-provoking conversation. I hope our audience is agreeing with that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody for engaging with our team online. And of course, do keep getting in touch with us. And we will hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
HTEC.